Imagine standing in the ruins of 1945 Britain. The Blitz has silenced the streets. The war is finally won, but the battle for survival is far from over. Soldiers are returning home, tired and hopeful, only to find that home doesn't exist anymore. There are no bricks. There are no masons. There are no houses. But then a miracle appeared. They arrived on the back of trucks in 4 separate pieces. They weren't made of stone or slate. They were made from the wreckage of war itself. They were called the Tin Palaces, the Prefabs. Designed to last just 10 years, these little boxes built from melted-down fighter planes became the most beloved homes in British history. For many of you watching this, they weren't just temporary shelters. They were the first time you ever tasted true luxury. Today, we are opening the creaky metal gate and walking back up the garden path. We are going to explore the 20 distinct features that made living in a prefab a unique, unforgettable experience. From the ice on the inside of the windows to the luxury of the indoor loo, let's travel back to when British homes were built from war scraps. The melted Spitfire connection. We have to start with the most fascinating fact of all. If you lived in an IRO house, you were quite literally living inside a recycled weapon of war. The acronym stood for Aircraft Industries Research Organization on Housing. You see, during the war, Britain had ramped up aluminium production to build Spitfires, Lancasters, and Halifax bombers. When the fighting stopped, we had mountains of aluminium scrap and huge factories with nothing to build. So the government made a genius decision. They melted down the old fighter planes to build your roof and your walls. It is a romantic thought, isn't it? That the very roof over your head might have once flown over the skies of Normandy or defended London during the Battle of Britain. These aluminium walls were prefabricated in factories, painted in a pale cream or green, and shipped out. They were light, they were modern, and they were the ultimate symbol of swords turning into plowshares. The 4-hour construction. Miracle! If you were a child in the late 40s, watching a prefab go up was better than going to the cinema. It was absolute magic. Traditional houses took months to build. A prefab, it took a morning. The Excalibur estate in Catford or the streets of Birmingham would wake up to empty bomb sites, and by tea time, there would be a row of brand-new bungalows standing there. The sections were delivered on lorries, floor, walls, and roof, all pre-assembled. A team of men, often German or Italian prisoners of war working alongside British laborers, would bolt them together. For a country used to the slow pace of bricklaying, seeing a fully formed house appear in 4 hours was a sign that the future had finally arrived. The asbestos insulation. Now we must address the elephant in the room. Item number 3 is something we didn't worry about then, but we certainly talk about now. Asbestos. In the 1940s, asbestos was considered a wonder material. It was fireproof. It was an incredible insulator, and it was cheap. Almost every prefab was packed with it. It was in the cement cladding of the Archon Mark V houses. It was in the lagging around the pipes. It was in the ceiling panels. Back then, nobody knew the health risks. It kept the homes relatively warm and safe from fire. Today, the presence of asbestos is the main reason why so few of these houses survive. But at the time, it was just another modern material keeping the cold British winter at bay. The notorious flat roof. If you ask anyone to draw a prefab, they will draw a box with a flat roof. This was the defining silhouette of the era. But, oh, those flat roofs came with a reputation. They were covered in felt and bitumen, designed to be waterproof, but British weather is relentless. The sound of rain drumming on that flat roof is a core memory for anyone who grew up there. It was a loud, rhythmic thrumming that could be comforting or deafening. However, after a few years, the leaks began. Buckets and bowls placed strategically in the hallway or the living room became a common sight. The flat roof was a modernist design choice, but perhaps not the best choice for a rainy Manchester or Glasgow. The mock chimney stacks. Here is a detail that reveals so much about the British psychology. Even though these houses were modern, industrial, factory-made boxes, the designers knew that British people loved tradition. We didn't want to live in robots. We wanted to live in cottages. So they added fake features. Item number 5 is the mock chimney. Many prefabs, despite having complex internal flue systems, had a little stovepipe or a brick effect casing sticking out of the roof to mimic a traditional chimney stack. It was a psychological comfort, a little nod to the past to make these strange metal boxes feel like a proper home. The entrance hall. Let's step inside. For families moving from Victorian tenements or cramped terraced houses, the layout of a prefab was a revelation. You didn't just walk straight into the living room from the street. You had a front door, often with a glass panel that opened into a dedicated hallway. This seemed small, but it offered dignity. There was a place to hang your coat and take off your muddy boots before entering the living space. It separated the outside world from the sanctuary of the home. The hallway often had a cupboard for the meters, and it was the traffic junction of the house, leading you to the 2 bedrooms or the living area. The service unit, engineering wonder. Now we move to the heart of the machine. The Ministry of Works created something brilliant called the Ministry of Works Service Unit. This was the mechanical core of the house. Imagine a large metal box. On one side, facing the kitchen, it contained the stove, the sink, and the fridge. On the other side of that same metal wall, facing the bathroom, it contained the bath taps and the wash basin. All the plumbing, the water tank, and the gas pipes were hidden inside this single unit. It was incredibly efficient. If something went wrong, a workman only had to open one panel. It was space-age efficiency brought to domestic life. The built-in refrigerator. If you remember nothing else about prefabs, you will remember this. Item number 8 is the refrigerator. You have to understand, in 1945, working-class British families did not have fridges. We had pantries. We had meat safes with mesh doors. Or we put the milk in a bucket of water to keep it cool. But the prefab came with a gas-powered Electrolux refrigerator built right into the kitchen wall. It was small, roughly waist height, but it was a game changer. You could keep milk for more than a day in summer. You could set jelly. You could keep butter without it melting. It was the ultimate status symbol, a luxury that even people in big brick houses didn't have. The fold-down kitchen table. Space was at a premium in the kitchen, which was often a galley style, long and narrow. To solve this, designers included a clever fold-down table. It was hinged to the wall. When it was time for tea, you unlatched it, dropped the leg, and gathered around on stools. When the meal was finished, you wiped it down and folded it flat against the wall so you had room to do the washing. It was cozy, intimate, and incredibly practical. That table was where homework was done, where bills were paid, and where the family ate together every single night. The metallic clank of the cupboards. We cannot talk about the kitchen without talking about the sound. Because timber was in such short supply after the war, the fitted kitchen cupboards were made of steel or aluminium. They didn't feel like wood. They were cold to the touch. And when you closed a drawer or shut a cupboard door, it didn't make a soft thud. It made a distinct metallic clank or a hollow ring. That sound, the sound of a spoon being dropped in a metal drawer or the door latch clicking shut, is the soundtrack of a prefab childhood. The deep Belfast sink and hot water. Item number 11 is the sheer joy of the sink. These were often deep, white ceramic Belfast sinks. They were huge. You could easily wash a week's worth of clothes in them or scrub the mud off a toddler. But the real miracle wasn't the sink, it was what came out of the tap. Constant, hot water. For families used to boiling kettles on a stove, to fill a tin bath in front of the fire, turning a tap and getting steam was like magic. The back boiler system ensured that if the fire was lit, the water was hot. It revolutionized hygiene and comfort for millions of people. The coal fire. Let's move into the living room. Dominating the space was the coal fire. This was the only source of heating for the entire house. In the winter, the prefab could get freezing cold. We'll get to that in a moment. So life revolved around this fire. It had a back boiler behind it to heat the water. The fire surround was usually tiled, simple and neat. In the evenings, the whole family would squeeze onto the sofa and chairs, getting as close to the orange glow as possible. Toasting bread on a fork in front of those coals is a memory shared by almost every prefab child. The CC41 utility furniture. Many families had lost everything in the Blitz. They had no beds, no tables, no chairs. So, the government provided utility furniture. You might remember the logo, 2 cheeses with a slice missing, which stood for Civilian Clothing 1941, but was applied to furniture too. This furniture was simple, sturdy, and made of oak or mahogany veneer. It wasn't fancy, but it was good quality. Every prefab looked slightly similar inside because everyone had the same government-issue wardrobe and the same dining chairs. It created a sense of equality. No one was showing off because everyone had the same start. The Crittall steel windows. The windows in a prefab were large, letting in lots of light. They were made by Crittall with thin steel frames. They looked very modern, almost Art Deco. But item number 14 is the battle against the cold. Single-glazed steel windows are terrible insulators. In the depths of a British winter, condensation would form on the glass and then freeze. You would wake up in the morning to find beautiful, intricate fern-like patterns of ice on the inside of your bedroom window. We used to scratch pictures in the ice with our fingernails before getting dressed under the covers to stay warm. The indoor toilet. If the fridge was the jewel of the kitchen, the indoor toilet was the king of the house. Item number 15. We cannot overstate how big a deal this was. Before the war, millions of Britons used an outhouse, a freezing cold shed at the bottom of the garden, often shared with spiders and damp. The prefab had a separate toilet room, indoors, clean, flushable, and private. No more trekking out in the rain with a torch or a candle. It was a sign of civilization. It was a sign that the working class deserved comfort too. Now it's time to goodbye to you. So, tell me, were you one of the lucky ones? Did you grow up with the sound of rain on a flat roof and a fridge that felt like a miracle? Tell me your memories in the comments below. I'd love to read them.